All right, guys. So what we're going to do, if you can go ahead and turn to page 5 in your notes, we did the first 4 pages on Wednesday. Since I'm not here, I wanted to go through the notes with you guys to make sure that I explained everything since we do have the test on Tuesday. So don't forget on Tuesday, we're going to take the first half of class to review a little, and then we're going to take the test. So that definitely means that you need to make sure that you are as prepared as you can be and you come with just a couple of questions because I'm not going to have time to reteach you everything that you need to know for the test. So make sure you're paying attention for the next couple of notes. I'll split up the videos so each one isn't super long, but make sure you go through. If you have any questions while I'm talking, write those down so that you're prepared to ask them on Tuesday and you're as ready as you can be for the test. So this first page that we're going to start with is not too bad. A lot of it you already know. It is about phase changes. So on Wednesday, we learned about that you can only use the Q equals MC delta T when a substance is warming up, but when it can't go through a phase change. So when we're talking about phase changes, there are technically 6 of them. You guys should be pretty familiar with at least 4. So the first one is when you're going from a solid to a liquid, like ice to water. That would be the phase change of melting. When you are going from a liquid to a gas, that is technically called vaporization. Now, there are 2 types of vaporization, and you're probably more familiar with those terms than you are with the term vaporization or vaporize. And those 2 terms that you guys probably know of is the first type is boiling. You guys are used to a liquid going to a gas by boiling. And then the second one is evaporation. Now, both of those terms, boiling and evaporation, both fall under the category of vaporization. It all means going from a liquid to a gas. Um, the major difference between boiling and evaporation is just that boiling, the heat source is underneath. So think about a stove where the heat is coming from underneath the pot. It's boiling the entire pot of water, and that it's all being heated up and that liquid is turning into a gas. Evaporation means the heat source is on top. The liquid gets hot, only the top layer, and it evaporates in layers. So think about a lake. If you guys have ever dipped your foot in a lake or a pool and it seems like it's really warm and then you jump in and the water underneath is cold, that's because the sun is only heating that top layer up. Um, this one, going from a solid to a gas, you may not be quite as familiar with, but that is dry ice. So when you pour a liquid over dry ice, it all of a sudden, that solid block turns into a gas. Dry ice is actually solid carbon dioxide. That phase change is called sublimation. All right, then if we're going from a liquid to a solid, like water to ice, hopefully you guys are familiar with that. That is obviously freezing. When you have a gas going to a liquid, that is called condensation or condensing. Think about in the summer when you wake up in the morning, there's dew on the grass and on your windows. Typically, that's because during the day is really hot, so a lot of that water evaporates into the air. That's why it's so humid. There's always moisture in the air. At night, when it cools down, all of that gas condenses into a liquid and it sits on different surfaces, like your windows or your car or the grass. This is another one, a gas straight to a solid where it skips the liquid phase. You might not be as familiar with this. This is called deposition. So those 6 phase changes you're going to want to make sure that you guys are aware of and that you know. Now, down at the bottom here, we have this little chart where it shows solid, liquid, gas. What I want to show you guys here is just how these different phase changes kind of fit in and how they go along with endothermic and exothermic. So I am going to go ahead and I am going to write all of the exothermic phase changes in blue. So exothermic means that something loses heat. If it's losing heat, it's getting colder. So from a liquid to a solid, which would be freezing, from a liquid to a solid, that would be exothermic because it is getting colder. Going from a gas to a solid would be exothermic because it's getting colder, and that one is deposition. And then the last one, when you're going from a gas to a liquid, that's also going to be exothermic because it's losing heat, and that is going to be condensing or condensation. I'm also going to write on here, I'm going to write the endothermic phase changes. And I'm going to go ahead and write these in red. Um, Endothermic, remember, means that something gains heat, that it becomes hotter. So when something goes directly from a solid to a gas, that's called sublimation. That is an endothermic phase change. The solid has to gain heat to become a gas. Another one is when you go from a liquid to a gas. So that's also going to be endothermic because that liquid has to get hotter to become a gas. So remember, that's called vaporization, evaporation, or boiling. Um, I'm going to go ahead and write vaporize on here. And then the last one, when you're going from a solid to a liquid, that obviously has to get warmer. It has to gain heat. So that would also be endothermic, and that would be melting. So all of these red ones are your endothermic. All of the blue ones are your exothermic. The last part on this page that I have on here is you guys can see this box right here with the different arrows in it. And this part, what this is really showing you is that if we say the bottom here, let's say this is a solid, in the middle it is a liquid, and up here it is a gas. Basically, what we are looking at here is, let's take a look at endothermic reactions. So endothermic reactions is when something goes from a solid to a liquid. It's when something goes from a liquid to a gas, or it's when something goes directly from a solid up to a gas. So essentially, this arrow here that I just drew in, that is going to be directly from a solid to a gas. That's your sublimation. And sublimation basically skips that middle liquid step where, like I said, when you go from a solid to a liquid, that's melting. And then when you go from a liquid to a gas, that's going to be vaporization or boiling. And then the other direction is kind of the same thing, where when you go from a gas to a liquid, that is going to be your condensation. When you go from a liquid to a solid, that's freezing. And then if you go directly from a gas to a solid and you skip that liquid phase, that is your deposition. So this chart over here matches this, which also matches up there. So that's going to be your first page of notes. And I wanted, like I told you guys, I wanted to split this up. Um, After watching this video, if you have any questions, make sure you write those down. This is page 5 of your notes, so make sure that you move on to page 6 of your notes next.